Riker's Iron presents.
Okay, so let's start this. Let's do this, folks. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our first MonTalk of 2020. Today's topic is Armodax. We're going to be going over Armodax. We're going to go over his alpha form. We're going to be going over his hyper form. We're going to be going over monster pairings with him. We're going to be going over map, unit, and building suggestions for playing with this monster. And then we're going to take a look at the community paint jobs and other things like that that we've kind of looked for on Facebook. And we're going to go live with the Discord as well today. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to go over each form. Then I'm going to jump into voice chat with the community here. We have Emberwild on the line and Gearbox as well, who play the game very regularly and participate in a lot of tournaments and things and local stuff. And they'll have a little thing or two. It's kind of nice because Gearbox comes from the side of playing Armodax, Emberwild comes from the side of versus Armodax. So it'll be a fun little juxtaposition there. The goal of the MonTalks is to outline not what's broken, not what needs to be fixed. It's to outline the positive aspects of the monster and the creature, how to use them. We do the same thing for units. Some units and some monsters in the game right now are a little bit underwhelming, but we try to come up with ways to use them, how to use them, and suggest ways to make them effective in whatever form that they come in. So that's kind of the goal. Armodax, let's take a peek. Armodax, he's got Demolisher, which is a very cool ability. But first, let's go over his base stats. So he's got Speed 6, Defense 7, a little bit lower average of defense because of his other abilities that he has on him. He's also a beefy monster. He sits there with that 12 health, which is pretty potent right now. It's probably, I think, one of the higher health things. Not the highest. There's a new big boy in town for that one, but pretty high on the spectrum. He comes with a brawl and a power attack. He has no blast. His brawl attack has power gorge, so it says when this attack destroys an enemy model, you gain one additional power die. So every time he destroys any enemy, he's going to gain an extra power die. So, or an additional, sorry. So if you kill a unit, instead of getting one, you get two. It's very, very nice. His brawl is 7 white, 7 action, 4 boost, and his power is 6 action, 4 boost. Pretty average right there, nothing really too special. I mean, the power gorge is pretty good, but his core special rules of his alpha form are Demolisher. So Demolisher says, when this model makes an attack, gain +1 power dice for every building destroyed as a result of this attack, which is pretty cool. I love rampaging with him for that, but we'll talk about that in a second. Armored, this model is immune to damage from collisions with buildings, and that's a very specific wording, and that'll come into play with things like beatback and more recently the release of the Psi Eel. And then there's resilience. So this monster is immune to super damage, so anything that does super damage, I'm sorry, but it's not going to do super damage. So let's jump into the voice chat, say hello, and we'll see who's in there. So
hello
everybody.
Hello.
So that's Emberwild. Say hello, Gearbox.
Hello, Gearbox.
Okay, so
you saw that one.
Yeah, I saw that one coming. So let's jump in. Let's start talking about Armodax, and maybe we can start off by things to remember with the special abilities and other things. Like I was saying, the very specific wording on Armored. It's immune to collisions with buildings. So that doesn't include collisions with monsters via beatback and collisions with the new Psi Eel.
Or collisions with hazards.
Or collisions with hazards, yes. That's also a very good thing to keep in mind.
But it does render you immune to Spire because the Spire special rule creates an additional building collision damage.
So it does or doesn't?
It does. So Spire says that this building causes an additional point of collision damage.
Okay.
That's part of the building. So when you throw Armodax onto a Tokyo Triumph, he takes 0 additional damage from the attack.
Oh, because it specifies as building collision.
Right. And the Tokyo Triumph is incombustible, so there is no hazard that gets left behind.
Ah, okay, cool. Now, Gearbox, you say you're currently playing Armodax as well?
Yeah, he's my primary. He's one of my 2 tournament monsters right now.
Dig it, dig it. Now, in his alpha form, what kind of things do you kind of keep in mind with his alpha form? Any sort of things like I've been enjoying rampaging with him, getting those extra power dice at the start to just power things up and really get aggressive.
I rely on my units to generate my power dice for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I think the key thing that I do with Alpha Armodax is I don't screen Alpha Armodax.
Mm-hmm.
His defense 7 is the lowest in the game, but because he's armored and resilient, and because he has 6 health in his alpha form, it's really, really hard to punish Armodax in any significant way. The most damage that an attack will do is 4 damage, and that's on Carnage Corners if all 3 buildings in the corner are hazard buildings. Yeah,
very good to keep in mind. Very, very good. Now, what about you and like units? Are you scared of units? Because I didn't find the unit turns. Defense 7, sometimes defense 6 with a spotter or something to negate that, but like I never felt the pain of unit damage with my Armodax. He was always alive at the end of the game. Of all the games I've played, he's never died.
So the thing is that the only time that units really threaten Armodax is when he's in the back of the enemy's base by the enemy's spawn points, destroying the enemy's power structure. So your opponent suddenly has a problem in that they have to generate red dice to take out the other monster that you're bringing with Armodax, or they can spend those white dice on getting damage directly on Armodax.
Exactly. That's what I found too. Is like they have to focus fire, and if they focus fire too little on Armodax, you regret it. But even if they go after the other guy, like he's a very I don't know what it is. He forces you to pick. You have to pick, or you're not gonna have a chance.
I think the thing about Armodax is he forces your opponent into making bad decisions.
Yeah. Totally agree. And Emberwild, facing off against Armodax, what have you been trying to do or done successfully?
I ignore him at first. I don't deal with him at all until I've dealt with the other monster. But yeah, I don't worry too much about him. Early game, there's all the buildings around, and he doesn't care about the buildings. So I just kind of demolish the city with throwing his paired monster into the buildings and create the hazards that way. And then I'll deal with him afterwards by, hopefully they'll still hazards around.
I've been using kind of similar tactics with against Hondo. Against Hondo, because he also has the armored thing. So I use like whatever the pair up is to create the hazards, and then I switch fire and go after him. Unless he ends up in my power base, then that's a whole different story. Which is why for Armodax I try to get him into the enemy's power base to force him to do stuff to him, and then play around with my paired monster to really just annoy the shit out of people. At least so far, anyways. I mean, I've yet to go to a tournament with my list yet, so I'm not sure how that's going to work out.
Gearbox, do you find Power Gorge to be terribly useful?
Power Gorge is useless because you can always swat a unit into something more useful.
That's kind of what I was thinking, because I've never really seen it come up into play. His other abilities, his resilience and armored, are really...
the only time I can see Power Gorge coming into effect is if you brawl an enemy monster on its last health. Otherwise, you would swat a unit into something more valuable to get 2 and remove 2 units from the board, or you would be destroying a building with your brawl to generate 3 power dice, but you don't benefit from Power Gorge because Power Gorge is specifically enemy models.
Right.
I also use I use the brawl attack when there's leftovers. Like, let's say my unit turn, I ended up picking off a bunch of guys. There's one guy left. Nobody's in range to do a SWAT. I'll knock him out for Power Gorge and save a power dice. Just because, like, to SWAT, right, you gotta spend 1 to make 2, right?
Yeah,
correct.
Fair point.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel you on that. Like, that's like, to me, that's the only situation I've been using the brawl Power Gorge, and yeah. Anything else you guys want to talk about for the alpha form before we switch over?
I think we've got it covered.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's switch it up. Let's look at the hyper form. There he is. So, Armodax in hyper form keeps his speed 6, jumps up to defense 8, which is pretty cool, very useful. His brawl becomes 8 action, 5 boost, pretty badass on that, and he gets beat back. I love beat back. On brawl, usually if something power attack has an ability here, I'm more excited for it. But brawl, I've been using it pretty regularly just to try it out, and it's been pretty fun. Beatback says if this model hits an enemy monster with its attack, after the attack is resolved, you can move the monster hit up to 2 spaces in a straight line in any direction. During this movement, the target monster moves through and collides with buildings, units, hazards in its path. The target monster stops moving if it collides with another monster. Pretty cool, and we'll go over Beatback again in a second. So he retains Armored from his last ability, but he gets Riled. So he's no longer... He retains Armored and Resilience, so he still is immune to building collisions and super damage. But he gains Riled. When this monster is damaged or destroyed by an enemy attack, you gain 1 power die. So pretty cool. Anytime it takes damage, you're going to gain a power die. Unearthly Rage. When this model is in play, other allied models, so not allied faction, allied models, so all your models on the table gain Riled, which is, again, really cool. This kind of mimics a little bit like Gorgadra in the sense that once he gets Hyperform, you have a dice generator that's insane, especially with his resilience and armor. So let's jump in to the lads. So what do you guys think of Hyperform Armodax? I friggin' love it.
It is really good.
Yeah.
Only issue I have is that Beatback's on his hyper form, but I guess you really can't put that on his alpha form.
Yeah.
When there's not as much buildings as around, usually, hopefully by that point when he's goes to hyper.
That's what I love about Beatback is being able to knock them into like fires or volcanoes. I did that a couple times in the past few games. And now with the eel in play, you spawn an eel or 2 if you're playing with multiple. Beat back into these eels. They're like little mines that you can set off. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty disgusting.
And with armored, resilience, and 8 defense, which is about average in this game,
Yeah.
His 6 health goes a huge distance.
Yeah. Like they have to commit hard and plan those alley-oops, plan their vectors very carefully. I love Riled and our Unearthly Rage. That generation, it just like you can feed the machine and just not worry about it. You just send him in. He's gonna take some. Like, even if he takes a damage, you're getting some power dice back. You're throwing guys around. I feel very powerful when when he gets in and is just like a non-stop generation of power dice. More so towards the end game, assuming that the table's been used.
Yeah, the Riled Unearthly Rage combo is really good. I've played it with Gagadra a lot, and it's really nice. You just have all of that power dice coming in pretty much all the time late game when maybe your power base has been destroyed by that point, and now you've got all this coming in, and you don't. Yeah, and we all know that power attacks wins the game.
Yeah.
Another thing is that Armodax is generally staring down either a full health or another health monster. Sometimes, if your opponent knows what they're doing, Armodax is alone against the enemies.
Yeah.
And that means that your power dice generation is a lot harder, because if they're up against 2 monsters, your opponent can start whittling away at your power base and just one-on-oneing your Armodax. The Unearthly Rage means that that's not nearly as effective against a Hyper Armodax as it is against any other non-Unearthly Rage monster.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I felt that a lot. I'd always Maxim would drop towards the end of the game for me, and then Armodax would be the last one alive. And I mean, usually the single monster or the other monsters are down so low that it really didn't matter, but it was still like scary. It was like, ooh, this gets tight. But that power dice generation really came in handy. I'm not really sure what else to say about the Hyperform. It's really cool, that beat back with the being able to slam those guys around. I loved it on Defender X. It was what I always tried to get Defender X into, and like with it on Armodax, it just feels very familiar for me. So I'm enjoying playing him immensely because of it.
One thing to note is that he does lose Demolisher, so if there are buildings around, they aren't generating as much, but the Unearthly Rage and the Rile more than makes up for that loss.
Yeah, for sure. Very good point. I like that. Yeah, I think that's it for his alpha form. I mean, pretty cool. Very potent alpha form. I think probably one of the more potent ones in the game right now. Loving it. Digging it. Very good. So the next thing I want to jump into is monster combo suggestions. So I myself am playing him with Zor Maxim right now. I've been enjoying it a lot just because of forcing my opponent to commit to using his power dice to go after Maxim's 9 defense or 10 defense in Hyperform, or choosing to go after Armodax. It's been a real juxtaposition of the type of model and the type of monster that it is. Super fast, high defense, slow, but tanky. Very cool little combo that at least I've been enjoying anyways. Who are you pairing him up with right now in Gearbox?
I lean on my crutch and I pair him with Sky Sentinel, but he pairs well with anyone who has high mobility.
Mm-hmm. You definitely need something that can get through those buildings and get around those other monsters.
Somebody that can feed monsters to Armodax is really nice.
Yeah, one trap I want to point out is that General Hondo is not a good pairing with Armodax, despite they're both having armored in 3 of the 4 forms.
Yeah.
Because Hondo is a pedestrian and slow.
Yeah.
And doesn't have the dice generation that is necessary to the action dice generation that you need to push pedestrians into enemy monsters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can do okay with Krakenoctus, but it's not as great.
So what has been your experience with Armodax and Krakenoctus together? Because in theory, it sounds like that would be a really strong combo, because Krakenoctus would be able to extinguish a whole bunch of those hazards that Armodax doesn't like to see, especially late game.
The issue I have with it is that the solution to both of those monsters is chuck them away as far as you can and then deal with the other one. And you can do that pretty easily with either monster. If you have the ability to go around high mobility or disrupt the pedestrian getting into you, Krakenoctus and Armodax can both be chucked around the board. And yes, it's a lot of health and a lot of damage to chew through, but you don't have to deal with both of them at once if you devote the resources to getting rid of them.
Of those two, like let's say Krakenoctus and Armodax, who do you think would be a little bit more on the power dice hungry side?
They both are pretty good at generating their own power dice, because Kraken's got fling and lightning attack, so he can generate 4 a turn if he's doing nothing else, and Armodax has demolishers, so he can generate 3 just by punching any building whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's basically, what do you want to pair them with when you're choosing between Kraken and Armodax, in my opinion.
Now, of the monsters available to protectors currently, not ones unreleased or ones that have been previewed, let's say Sky Sentinel didn't exist, who would be your next choice in line?
Maybe Nova? Probably Zormaxim, actually, but I'd want 11 health, and I'd want the flight to be able to actually get through those hazards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd probably run Maxim with Armodax as my if my Sky Sentinel broke on the floor. Oh wait, Pterodax is available. What?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be a good one.
Pterodax.
Yeah, he just came out. I was thinking about Pterodax
fantastic with Armodax
as my alternate to Maxim. That would be my.
Yeah, Pterodax is 9 health, 9 defense in both forms. Has the airdrop in Hyperform. Yeah, no, I'd take Pterodax. Forget that Zormaxim guy.
And I would probably put Incinerus down at the bottom of the list of a pairing with Armodax.
Yeah,
I've
me
faced
too.
that against it. They don't synergize very well at all.
Yeah. Him and
what's Armodax's weakness? Fire. What does Incinerus do? Make fire.
Exactly.
Yeah, myself, I'm playing Maxim right now with Armodax, and I'm loving it for the reasons that you pointed out. Very fast, very mobile. I love the energy cycle and the penetration on his various forms. I just like the way that he plays, and he's been a very fun pair up. Like I said, I would probably do Pterodax only because I like the whole idea of like super tanky dinosaur and super flying dinosaur paired up. It wasn't really a
well, Pterodax. Go
on. No, it wasn't really a an option just currently because I don't have him yet.
Pterodax is also probably going to have more health than Maximum because you're going to walk through fires that you're immune to, thanks to flight. So that edge of having flight in both forms, it generally makes up for that 10 defense.
Yeah, that 10 defense every time. It's like, what, 10? Like, yes, 10. You're kind of like, heh, 10. It's very satisfying to. Then they're like, oh, two more. It just
forces your opponent when you've got that 10 defense to really make those attacks count.
Yeah.
And it pretty much eliminates.
Very rarely would they be able to do like a follow-up attack, like a slam, and then like, you know, sometimes the guys have like rapid fire or whatever. They just can't hit that 10 again with something that isn't their initial attack. So,
right, and any chance of getting a hit on him is moot. You've got to get so many dudes on him, and that's probably not going to happen.
I haven't had any experience with Amodax yet, so I'm just sort of curious to hear what some of the other people are saying.
Okay, cool.
Just want to know what you're saying about the whole thing about ignoring Armodax and taking on the second one first, and because I mean, if you are taking on Armodax first, he's so long to chip away at and takes so long to take down. Basically 1 health per attack. That by the time he makes it into hyper, and he's so much stronger, you're gonna be in a lot of trouble facing a full strength monster and a hyper Armodax.
Yeah.
So you are better off with the alpha, the other monster completely before you take on Armodax.
Yeah.
Well, the other way I look at that too is the reason why I save Armodax is because of the resilience. With all the buildings around, I'm wasting potential damage by throwing him into those. Where if I his paired monster into those buildings, I'm gonna come out further ahead. And then since he doesn't care about buildings when there's only hazards around, then I'm better off there because now I've got hazards I'm just throwing him in or slamming him into.
Okay, so let's move on. So that kind of wraps up the thing. So suggestions for this: we like Store Maxim. Pterodax is our alternate choice for a good monster combo for him. Do you guys have any other ideas for him that you would suggest that you've used or faced off against, or seen someone else play that was super crazy?
The most important thing for the pairing is high mobility.
Yeah. You need something to let them move around and set up your alley-oops. Okay, so let's move into the next part. Now, this part is going to be kind of a mixed bag of stuff. So let's first talk about map. So what map? I know I talked with you, Gearbox, privately about this stuff already, and we kind of I think we're probably in agreement on it. But what map would you choose if you got to choose the map to play on with Armodax? For me, it would be Carnage Corners.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm taking
we still
Carnage
sort
Corners.
of settled on a prime choice for a second pairing of Monster, but for Amodax in isolation, I think, yes, Carnage Corners is an excellent choice because it's much more risk to the opponent than it is to him.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of potential. The building count is the highest, so there's a lot of building potential for rampaging, gaining damage for not damage, power dice for himself.
And again, I think that also ties in with Gearbox's. You need something with flight or high mobility in there to help, just to keep things going for him. Because you don't want especially on that one, you don't want too pedestrian.
What do we think about the new map, Obliteration Boulevard, the one that's coming out in May?
I haven't had a good chance to look at it yet. Is it on? Let me see if I can pull it up. I don't know.
I'm sure there's pictures of it someplace, but
yeah, there's pictures on the subreddit, and it's on the Tabletop Simulator now.
I haven't seen it yet.
It doesn't look as good to me because of how vertical aligned it is, as opposed to Carnage, which is more of a horizontal map.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, the new map kind of funnels pedestrian monsters down certain corridors, which I think could, you could predict where he's planning on going more easily if you're facing him, and really limits what you can do with him after that.
Yeah, it seems like everything kind of just moves to the center through there, like a natural flow.
Right.
Man, there's a lot of power nodes on that.
Yeah, there's 8.
It's crazy.
So much power.
There's a laneways on the left and right, and this big lane through the center.
Yeah.
So
another interesting thing about Obliteration is it doesn't have as many double foundations as Carnage does.
Yeah. Yeah, the only ones are here in the center.
That makes it.
Oh no, wait, there's 2 on the edge here. Sorry, I missed those.
2, 4.
It's just these.
Well, in the corners on the center, there's like a three things in the corner, so you can hit 2 buildings in 2 different ways depending on how you throw them.
And then there.
That's true. I feel like Carnage is better.
Yeah, I think Carnage is still my choice. So it's a very cool map. Yeah, what do you think is the worst one for?
I'd say Annihilation.
Annihilation.
Yeah.
There's that big hazard in the middle that you just can't deal with.
Yeah, I played it on that a lot this past weekend, and it was nice to be able to beat back guys into that volcano repeatedly, but on the other side of it, I was also thrown into that volcano repeatedly for 2 damage, so it was definitely the shittiest of the maps for me personally.
Yeah, no. And also, since the thing that Armodax loves is multiple buildings, bringing Armodax to the board that has the least number of building foundations in the game makes it problematic for Armodax.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we can move on from the map discussion. I think it's a good choice. The Carnage Corners, at least right now. Who knows what'll happen in the future? And least map you don't want to play on is Isle of Annihilation. So units and buildings. I have no preference for units. I mean, he doesn't really synergize particularly for, at least in my head, with anything in specifically. Outside of the eel, being able to beat back those dudes into an eel mine or, toss a guy onto there. But that's kind of a general thing for any of the Protector guys right now. I don't know, is there anything you guys have in mind for unit pairing specifically for or with Armodax?
I don't have much for that since I'm usually facing him, not trying to build a list with him.
What is Armodax's best building, Riker?
Tokyo Triumph.
Yeah, I was going to say the Spiky Tower. I always forget the name of it, Spiky Tower.
So Tokyo Triumph leaves behind a single rubble, which can be repaired for 1 action die using the repair truck
That's
into
true.
another Tokyo Triumph.
That's true.
Imagine how that works. It's just crazy.
That is the best unit with Armodax, which is why my Armodax lists run 2, so that if it's over on one side of the board and I need it on the other side of the board, I can spawn it there.
Yeah, that's a very good call. Now you're making me want to add. I have 3 repair trucks for some reason. I don't know how I ended up with 3 of them. But
jets would probably be nice because they hit fairly hard, and when he goes hyper, then really, they're easy to hit, so you get more power dice for him back too. So
now, what do you use, Emberwild, to go after Armodax unit wise? Do you commit a specific unit type? Chompers? I was expecting chompers.
Yeah, chompers can do a good number on them.
Yeah. Yeah, especially
But yeah, like we're talking about earlier, if we're focusing units on him, then I'm not generating power dice with those units too. So.
Building wise, I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit. The Tokyo Triumph, I think, is definitely the best one. I think I only have 1 of those right now. I have ideas for conversions and other things, so I only have been purchasing 1 at a time. So
the other thing is probably good with them is the downtown high rise. If he feels like munching on him to gain a little health.
Yeah, gaining health on him, I think, while very situational, is such a pain in the ass for the opponent. Like,
so disheartening.
It takes so much to do a damage to him that it's like, oh my god, he got 1 back. Yeah.
Power plants are pretty good.
Yeah.
Guard base.
Yeah.
ISB.
Guard base is great.
Yeah.
You can do the ISB like just before a throw, because that's the thing is the ISB can be done in the monster term, which is something new in 2nd edition, I believe. I don't think it was done in the 1st edition, but to be able to just swap out a building to do extra damage.
That's true.
Is
pretty
cool. Yeah, I never considered that swapping out a building to put in a Tokyo.
I've done that before. I've swapped out a power plant for, I think it was just an apartment building because that's what I had secured, and for an extra damage.
Even if you're taking out a communications array to swap it for an apartment building just for that extra damage. I mean, yes, the hazard can now hurt you too, but I mean, just at least in certain situations, it's going to be certainly advantageous to get that extra damage on, even if it's more of a threat to you.
Yeah.
And if you time it right, it's not an issue for you, because that hazard or that building is not going to be there after your attack anyway. So.
Or even if you use the ISB to not throw the monster onto the building that you swapped out, but swap it for like a Mount Terra and then use that to get Armodax out of the way.
True.
Okay. I don't know if anybody has any other building thoughts or...
The last one is, as always, the industrial plant, because the industrial complex, because it gives you that additional speed and saves you that step die, and that adds up over the course of the game.
That concludes the MonTalk portion, folks. Is there any last thoughts or words or anything anybody wants to give about Armodax that we didn't talk about already? I myself have nothing, but if anybody else wants to chime in, if not, that's fine.
I'll say that I'm absolutely thrilled that Armodax is not a pushover monster like he was in first edition. And I can say that about many of the monsters.
Yeah.
I mean, seeing Crack go from a joke monster to the top monster in the Protectors is amazing. And my personal love is Kondo, so seeing him go from like a coaster monster to something really good is fantastic. Love it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I played Armodax in first edition as well, and I always ended up back on my Martians because every time I played, I was always like, yeah. So
Mega Armodax is good. Mega Armodax was the best, but he still wasn't competitive. I mean, not that I'm always want to be competitive, but just sometimes too, it's just you get just being beaten all the time.
Yeah,
Mark 1 Armodax was
because he was fun. That was it.
He's a very finessey monster in Mark 1 because he had protect him well. He could generate powered ice like crazy. But it was he was in certain situations, but yeah, he was always kind of frowned upon.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to thank. We have one more segment we're going to do. It's going to be an attachment to our MonTalks. But I want to thank Amber Wild. I want to thank Spaz, and I want to thank Gearbox for jumping in and giving their feedback and info and their thoughts and whatnot on Armodax today. So thanks a lot, guys. I'm going to add some tickets into the season end giveaway for you, and maybe you guys will win something. We don't know.